I still don't know to this day what made me act so irrationally when I decided to follow that car on a whim. I tell myself sometimes that curiosity might have played a big part, but I always felt like there was something more to it. I work night shifts because I'm simply unable to sleep or even rest when it's dark outside. I was told by a couple of doctors that there were treatments for this kind of thing, but I never had any real problem with it. I don't have much of a social life, but I'm fine with just working. And to be honest, there's just something about sleeping during the day and knowing that there is light outside that brings me great comfort. I'm not afraid of the dark or anything like that, but I can never wrap my head around the fact that most people go to bed when the world is shrouded in darkness. I always found that weird as a kid, and I guess it just stuck with me and my brain as I transitioned into adulthood. This is why I still drive around for another 2 or 3 hours after I leave work and before I head back home. I go on my night rides and enjoy some music until the first rays of sunlight show up. One day, however, as I was heading back home, somewhere around 6:30 a.m, a car drove past me, and I just happened to look at it. There was a child in the back seat of the car, no older than 10. She had something over her head, like a jacket, or maybe just a drape of some kind, possibly meant to keep her hidden, but doing a very poor job at it. As she looked out of the window towards me and waved, I noticed something not only incredibly odd, but also extremely chilling. She had bandages all around her face, covering her eyes as well as the bridge of her nose, and I saw 2 crimson spots where her eyes should be. It only lasted for a few seconds at the most, and yet it felt like I had latched onto a non-existent gaze for far longer than that. I then watched the car drive away, threatening to leave me behind as dozens of questions lit up my brain. It surely was none of my business, but the more I thought about what I had just witnessed, the more I felt like I was entitled to some answers. You ever seen someone have a meltdown at the mall, or witness something that just makes you stick around for a little too long just to see what's going to happen next? It was exactly like that. Except that in this case, I couldn't just stay put. Not only did I have to keep driving, I would also have to follow whoever was driving that car with what appeared to be a recently blinded child. And that's what I did. Against any possible good judgment I might have had at that particular time. I knew right away that it wasn't a disguise or makeup of any kind. This might be hard to believe, but there was something about that kid and her whole demeanor that made me so sure of that fact. If she had just been through some kind of surgery or medical procedure, I couldn't imagine her being released from hospital care so soon, and especially in that condition. Of course, there was also the possibility that she was in need of care and being driven to a hospital on that Sunday morning. But I knew the roads well enough to know that there was no such destination anywhere in that direction. Not only that, but whoever was driving the car didn't appear to be in any kind of rush either. I tried to keep my distance, since there were barely any other cars on the road at that time, until a gas station eventually came into view. One I don't think I had ever spotted before that day. And sure enough, the car I was tailing seemed like it was going to stop by, so I pulled over as well. I was a little worried and hesitant at first, because the gas station appeared to be abandoned, which might have been why I'd never actually paid much attention to it in the first place. But sure enough, there were other cars and people there, coming and going about their business. It only occurred to me when I was parking my car that I had no idea what I was doing and what exactly my next course of action should be. I wasn't just going to take someone's child and bring them along with me without having a clear picture of what was going on, because that's a recipe sure to have you killed by cops by the end of the day. The other car had parked somewhere nearby as well, so I decided to stay put inside my own and wait to see how things would develop. Maybe they'd noticed that I had been following them for a while and decided to see for themselves whether I was onto them or not. That wasn't the case. After a couple of minutes, a woman wearing a black veil and dressed in all black stepped out of the driver's seat. I really couldn't tell much other than the fact that it was a woman and that she didn't seem concerned in the least with her surroundings, which meant I was in the clear. At first glance, and judging by her body language, nothing about her seemed to indicate that she was up to no good. Other than a peculiar sense of style, she seemed relatively normal, and I started to wonder whether I had imagined the child with the bleeding eyes in her back seat. I found myself hoping that I wasn't wrong, which is quite a morbid thought to have, but the other alternative would be me beginning to go slightly crazy, which seemed like a far scarier thought at the time. The woman walked over to the other side of the car and slyly knocked on the window of the passenger seat at the back. Only then did I notice that she was carrying a small plastic bag. Not a purse or a wallet, just some white, generic plastic bag. She bent over a little so her eye level would match the window of the car and stayed like that for a minute or two before leaving. She had to have been talking to someone, and in my head, that was all the confirmation I needed that I wasn't crazy. I observed her as she walked all the way over to the station itself, but instead of going for the main entrance, she went towards the one to the side, likely reserved for staff. And sure enough, by the time she got there, someone had opened the door and poked their head outside, no doubt waiting for her arrival. The woman stepped inside, and the other person looked around briefly before closing the door behind them. Something was up, and I didn't like whatever I was feeling brewing up in the pit of my stomach. I'd follow the car, mostly out of curiosity, I thought, but at that point in time, I found myself mostly concerned for the child's condition and overall safety. If anything, I had to make sure whether the kid was alright or not before either taking some action or simply moving on with my life. I didn't know for how long the woman in black would be gone, but the fact that she entered through the back door of the building probably meant that it was unlikely for her to have a clear view of her car, so I shouldn't have problems in approaching it and seeing what was up. I stepped out of my car, pretended to check my dead phone, and looked around for a bit while trying not to look suspicious at all. Eventually, I mustered up the courage and walked straight towards the side of the car where I'd seen the kid. I looked inside the car, but didn't see anyone. At least, not right away. I quickly noticed something shuffling underneath a blanket in the back seat and figured that had to be the girl, doing a very poor job of keeping herself hidden, which is what I assumed the woman had instructed her to do. Once again, I simply didn't know what exactly I was going to do or could do in that situation, let alone how I would react when finally facing that poor kid. I didn't have time to spare, so I knocked softly on the window. The shuffling stopped abruptly until whatever was under the drapes perked up and cast it aside, revealing itself as it turned towards the source of the sound. My heart sank, not out of fear, but pity. I don't have any kids, but there was something so sweet and pure about this little girl that I was immediately crushed by the sight of her bandages and what ravages lay underneath. The blood spots on her bandages only made it worse. They'd formed 2 little circles where the eyes would normally be, which then trickled downwards, forming 2 uneven lines, almost giving the impression that she had been crying. Whatever happened to this girl, I know she didn't deserve it, is what I remember thinking. "Hello?" she said, with a voice that didn't seem to indicate that she was in any kind of pain or distress. "Hey, hi." She immediately flinched, no doubt after hearing a stranger's voice, and moved further away from the window before retreating back under the covers. "Don't worry, it's okay," I said. "Can you roll down the window a little bit, please, so I don't have to talk so loud?" She remained perfectly still, probably thinking I'd just go away or forget that she was in there if she just stopped moving entirely. I didn't want to put too much pressure on her because I didn't know what exactly she had been through, except of course missing her 2 damn eyes. But I also couldn't just drop it. "You waved your hand to me a while ago. I saw you on the road. Are you alright? Is everything okay?" I said, as gently and concerned as I could. Only when I said those words out loud did it finally hit me. When I first saw her, I could tell she was waving to me. I knew that she knew I was there, in my car, driving alongside hers. But how could that be, if she was indeed missing her eyes, which, from the looks of it, was really the case? And I know she wasn't merely responding to the sound of a car nearby. No, it wasn't just that. I could tell she was communicating with someone she knew to be there, on the receiving end. I barely had any time to process this realization when I saw her immediately come out from under the blankets as soon as I had spoken. She then moved back to her original seat and rolled the window all the way down, now seemingly and inexplicably no longer afraid of my presence. "Oh, you're the nice mister," she said, implying that she knew something about me. I didn't know this girl. In fact, I don't even know when was the last time I interacted with a kid. But from the way she talked, you'd believe she knew me to some degree. But she couldn't possibly know me. And more than anything, she couldn't have possibly seen me or recognized me from anywhere. Not when she had those bloody bandages over her eyes. Realizing this made me snap back to reality and ask her the only question that mattered. "Hey, are you okay?" "Yes, mister." "Are you sure?" "Yes. Is something wrong?" Was there something wrong? I thought about it for a moment and considered the possibility that I was prying far too much on someone else's business. If there was a logical explanation for this girl's condition, then I was just being a creep who could very well be traumatizing a kid over her physical injuries for nothing. I don't know if I simply didn't want to be in the wrong and considered the bad guy, but something about the whole thing just didn't seem right. Something was off, but I couldn't quite put it on my finger. "You don't look okay to me. Did something happen to your eyes?" "Oh, today's my birthday, so my mother took them," she answered, beaming with a smile. It wasn't so much what she said, but how she said it that made me feel sick. For all intents and purposes, she truly believed she had given me a fairly normal reply and that no follow-up whatsoever would be needed. The lack of correlation between one thing and the other made my stomach churn. I didn't understand, and hoped that the girl had simply expressed herself in a wrong way. And yet, there was no denying that this child was missing her eyes. That much had become obvious to me. I don't understand. Was there something wrong with your eyes? Mother said I was chosen to make way, so she had to take them out. I paused for a moment, which allowed me to finally take notice of how badly I started to sweat. I didn't know what the hell was going on, and asking further questions would likely just push me further down this mess of a rabbit hole. I just wanted to leave. I wanted to get back in my car, get back on the road, and drive straight home for a much-needed drink before hitting the sack and cursing myself to sleep for not minding my own business. But as I looked at the young girl, I couldn't bring myself to just abandon her like that. I couldn't leave without having a clear picture of what was going on. Somehow, it just felt like I already knew too much by then, and if she was in need of help, and I happened to be in a position where I could provide it, I would never forgive myself for turning my back on her. And so I asked, "Make way for what?" I still remember her words to this day, because it's not just something one would easily forget, and yet I cannot bring myself to actually write it down, not word for word at least, because the way she spoke of it was just so... Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that my own wording will have to do. From what I understand, it was all mostly about blood. Not her blood, but someone else's. She referred to her eye sockets as gates, from where, quote, their blood would flow onto our land. Despite how obviously insane it all sounded to me, I could tell it wasn't something she was just making up on the spot, just as much as I knew that she wasn't delusional. No, she was very clearly reciting something that she had learned by heart, something someone had taught her and pounded into her little brain until it became a truth, a belief. She never gave up any specific information, nor did she mention actual names, only weirdly sounding ranks. But it was all more than enough for me to come to the conclusion that it had to be a crazed cult of sorts, or something like that. I've never been much of a religious person, and I've always thought that people should be allowed to believe in and pray to whatever they want as long as they're not hurting anyone else. But this, removing a child's eyes under the belief that someone else's blood would come pouring through from who the hell knows where. Unfathomable, unforgivable, insane. Those are the words my brain kept screaming. Being faced with this strange reality was a shock for sure. But by this point, I was angry above all else, and I was determined to save her. I had to take her with me. Where, I did not know. But it didn't matter as long as we got the hell out of there. Just as I found my resolve to act, the girl spoke up almost immediately, even before I said anything, almost as if she knew what was going through my mind. No, she said firmly. You can't. I was at a loss for words, and whenever I tried to say something, she'd be one step ahead. You will die, she continued. The only way for you to be alive by the end of the day is to go back to your car alone. I shook my head and tried opening her door. You have to go. Mother is on her way back now. I'd completely forgotten about her. In fact, I'd forgotten about most things completely due to the nature of the discussion I was having. I immediately shot up and looked around, but there didn't appear to be anyone heading our way. I can't let you stay with these people. Something is very wrong with them. You understand? I said. You need to come with me. I'll get you to the police or a hospital or something, but you have... They're all a part of it. Most of them are around these parts, she replied. You can't do anything, because you don't really know anything. Only one person can save me, and it's not you. Something about the way she spoke just devastated me. It wasn't so much the fact that she appeared to have accepted what had been done to her, but rather how truthful and final her statement seemed to be. She was right. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I was actually getting myself into. Not until I saw a glimpse of it, the reality of it. And yet, I know you can't possibly want this, I told her. The next words I heard were uttered from behind my back. Step away from the car. I turned around and froze. Just in front of me, not 20 feet away, was the woman that had been driving the car, the one dressed in black, with a dark veil still covering her face. The woman the girl referred to as Mother. And just beyond her, neither too close or too far from where she was standing, were another 15 people or so, all just standing perfectly still. I recalled what the girl said about me dying, and fear suddenly took over me. I could feel it in the air and in the presence of all those individuals, but Mother especially. She was the one that fervently gave off that sensation the most. That I was nothing to them, and that they could get rid of me as easily as someone flushes a turd down the drain. They looked at me, almost as if I wasn't human like the rest of them, just an aberrant, lowly life form that had trespassed upon their affairs. You shouldn't have followed us. You shouldn't have come here, the woman said, almost with a hint of sadistic satisfaction. And you definitely should not have talked to the living gate, maggot. She took a step towards me, as did all the others. I instinctively took a step back, but immediately hit the side of the car, as I had nowhere else to go. For a brief moment, I really thought I was going to die then and there over something that was so beyond my comprehension. But I was saved. Mother! The girl in the car shouted. I immediately turned around to see what had caused her to shout, and the sight I was met with was enough to make my legs go numb as I hit the ground, horrified. The girl had removed the bandages, and through the crimson, fleshy carved holes where her eyes used to be, an impossible amount of blood appeared to be spilling out. It's time. We have to go, the girl continued, seemingly unfazed by what was happening to her. I tried to look away, but I just couldn't avert my gaze from what I was witnessing, and that's what allowed the Mother to approach from behind without me taking notice right away. The girl is the one that alerted me to it. "Leave him. Do not touch him," the girl said. I turned to see the woman in black towering over me as she appeared to be staring intently at the girl inside the car. "Of course," the woman replied as she turned to face me. She lifted the veil that covered her face only slightly enough to reveal her lips and promptly spit on me. I couldn't react to anything that was happening, as it felt like it was taking everything I still had left in me to hang on to any semblance of sanity. "Rejoice, filth," the woman said to me. "The drowning has begun. Soon you will be washed away by his blood, along with all of this," she said disgustingly as she waved her hand around towards the barren landscape in view. And just like that, without saying any other word, she got back inside her car and left, along with the girl who seemed to have waved at me one last time as they drove away. All the other bystanders quickly got into their cars as well and followed, leaving me behind in a cloud of smoke and dirt, as if I'd never been there in the first place. I don't remember much of what happened next, but I do know that it took me a while to collect my thoughts, get back on my feet, and drive home. As you might have guessed, I never mentioned this to anyone, ever. Not until now. Even though I knew perfectly well that I hadn't imagined anything that happened on that early morning, I found myself trying not to dwell on it, see if I could forget some part of it, no matter how small. Now that I think back on it, I can see that I was simply trying to forget that I wasn't able to save that girl. It ate away at my conscience, constantly, whenever I tried picturing just what might have become of her. This sensation of helplessness and guilt haunted me for a long time, until the day I broke down and finally decided to investigate on my own, see if I could find any information whatsoever about any of it, that religion or whatever it was, the people involved, as well as the girl and what had become of her. My investigative skills didn't amount to anything, but one night I ended up overhearing a conversation at the bar by pure chance. A couple of guys, truckers I think, were arguing about weird stuff they'd seen on the road. It was almost like a drunken game to them, each trying to one-up the other at every chance they got. But then one of them got real quiet all of a sudden, right before he started talking about a strange incident from a few years ago. He wasn't there to see it for himself, he said, but a guy that he knew from the local police force told him about it. A car had crashed. 2 fatalities, a woman and a young girl. He mentioned that the police swept it under the rug as an accident, like so many others, when everybody involved knew that it was anything but normal. First, he said, it was obvious that this poor girl was missing her eyes way before the crash, but for some reason, the official version is that the crash itself caused all their injuries. Don't ask me why, he said. And second, he paused, took a sip of his drink, and then continued in a hushed tone. And second, the car had to be nearly overflowing with blood. Either that, or there had to be some other passengers or deaths that remained unaccounted for some reason. Why, you ask? Because there's no way a couple of bodies, one of them belonging to a wee kid, mind you, would result in such a spillage of blood. He waited for his buddy to say something or react in some way, but he just stared at him with his mouth hanging open. Yeah, I think he said something about signs of a struggle, but like I said, Only the girl and the woman were found in that wreck. All that blood painted an impossible area of the road. My buddy's exact words, I tell you. Wasn't roadkill either. Had to be something else. Deep down, I think that was all I needed to hear. Learning of a death crushed my soul, but I can't say I ever held out much hope. It wasn't until I got home that night that I recalled what she had said to me. Only one person can save me, and it's not you. I could be wrong, because I'm just a guy that doesn't know much about anything. But I think she was talking about herself. I think she caused the car to crash, but that was a decision that she made on the spot. Or was it something she knew it would happen, or that she could make it happen? Like I said, I don't know. But I do think about this from time to time. Either way, the truth is that whatever was put into motion that day came to a sudden halt with her death. And my gut tells me that she was somehow responsible for it. And yet, I can't say I'm at peace, because I worry that, in time, there will be others trying to bring about the exact same thing.